Welcome to Galactic Atlas lore. If you enjoy these tales, please like and subscribe. If you have any recommendations you would like me to explore, please leave a comment. Let's begin. The Apprentice's Shadow, Tales of a Sith Apprentice. Chapter 1. The Final Command. The summons came at dusk, though on this world dusk was a formality. The skies were always grey. Lightning coiled like serpents in the clouds, striking black stone peaks that jutted from the surface like broken teeth. This was Moritras, a world so forgotten its name no longer appeared in the Republic's charts. It was a place of burial, both literal and spiritual, a grave for Jedi long consumed by flame, and a forge for the monsters that crawled from that fire. She arrived at the obsidian tower through silence, her ship trailing no signature, cloaked in a shroud of electromagnetic fog. The citadel stood like a blade driven into the crust, its foundations built upon a force vergence so ancient that even the Sith texts only referenced it as the wound. The air was thin here, touched by sulphur and grief. The soil never gave birth to life, only bones and black vines that crawled like veins along the surface. This place had been chosen carefully. Like all Sith worlds, it had to reflect the order it sustained. Violent, forgotten, alive only through hate. Her boots echoed on the stone steps, and the wind whispered her name. Not because the world knew it, but because she had whispered it into the Force often enough for the dark to echo it back. She entered the sanctum unarmed. That alone was a lesson. Weapons did not make a Sith. Will did. She found him in the meditation chamber. Her master, Darth Vader, cloaked in tattered crimson, seated cross-legged upon the obsidian altar where a Jedi Knight had once bled out 200 years prior. The blood was still there, calcified into a spiderweb across the floor. She had cleaned it once during her initiation. Her hands bled. He had made her taste it. Every stone here remembers pain. Let it remember yours. She stood still, arms crossed behind her back, chin level, gaze sharp. No tremble, no doubt. She had been taught well. "You know why you are here," he said without looking. His voice was sand scraping metal. She said nothing. Her silence was acknowledgement. "You've studied the code, killed in my name, fought the traitor Jedi on Rawnax and brought me their hilts, passed the trials of cruelty, hunger and fire, and now you stand at the edge." Still she did not speak. He opened one yellow eye. "Kill me." The air seemed to freeze. Not from shock, she had expected it, but expectation was never preparation. To hear it aloud, spoken like a goodbye from someone who already knew he would not be mourned, it shifted something inside her. Calix rose, slow as a monolith waking, his breath misted in the cold air. "You have one cycle. From the rising of the tower's flame to its fall. If I still live when the flame dies, you will not. The path does not allow the weak to linger." He stepped past her, leaving behind only the scent of fire and oil, and the lingering pressure of his mind in the Force, sharp, burning, amused. The tower's flame ignited above her, an old Sith ritual fire, fueled by alchemic crystal and blood plasma. It would burn for one Coruscanti day, 24 hours standard. She had until then. This was the tradition, older than the modern Sith, the right of inheritance. Not all masters used it. Many were slain by treachery, by surprise in the dead of night. But Darth Vader had always preferred ritual over deception. A true master is not outwitted, he is overthrown. She returned to her ship briefly, retrieving her lightsaber, curved hilt, red etched with the names of those she had killed to earn it, names in High Sith scratched with her own blood into the durasteel. Every Sith weapon was a monument to memory, to violence, to ownership. Her name was Kalitha. No title yet, no Darth. She had not earned it. She descended into the lower halls of the Citadel, a place she had only glimpsed in passing, a labyrinth of chambers, tombs, and ancient devices humming with forbidden energy. This was not just a place of testing, it was history itself. The Citadel had once belonged to Darth Nihilus the Red during the Great Hyperspace War. Before that, the Rakata had carved their machines into the bedrock, draining planetary life through gravity wells and blood engines. The Sith had inherited it all. Broken machines, broken codes, broken bones, and made it their own. Kalitha passed murals of Sith Lords etched in crimson crystal, their eyes gleaming faintly with residual power. One showed Darth Nihil devouring a Jedi's soul through ritual flame. Another showed the destruction of the Ordu Aspectu, burned alive for their heresy. This place was not only designed to test her, it would consume her if she faltered. As she entered the descent corridor, her mind wandered, back to the moon of Drevan 6, where she had first killed, not in battle, but in anger. A rival acolyte had insulted her lineage. Half Celtron, half human, born in the slums of Arcanis. She had strangled him with a force grip while smiling. Calix had said nothing afterward, only nodded. "Your anger is elegant. I will keep you." She had been his for 7 years. Now she would be his no longer. The corridor opened into a vast antechamber. At its center stood a plinth. On it, the lightsabers of every apprentice who had failed the rite. Dozens, perhaps hundreds. The smell of scorched metal and bone lingered. She approached, and her boots made no sound on the black glass floor. Among the relics, she saw one saber she recognized, vergence, her first sparring partner. He had tried to escape this world after Calix took his eye. The Sith ships caught him before he reached orbit. His screams had been broadcast over the training compound's intercom. She placed her fingers on his hilt. Cold, still stained with blood. She closed her eyes, inhaled, and let the memory fuel her. "I am not them," she whispered. Not a plea, a vow. Behind her, a gust of wind echoed through the stone. The test had begun. Chapter 2. Descent into the Hollow. She passed the threshold of the Hall of Silence and left all light behind. What torches once lined the walls had long since burned out, their iron holders rusted to bone-white stone. The force shifted as she moved, thickened, became denser, as if the very air clung to her skin. It whispered, not with words, but with memory. Millennia of rage, pain, and ambition echoing in the ancient mortar. This was the Hollow. The Sith did not simply build on Moritris. They carved into it, bored through its crust to find the vergence, to tunnel toward the heart of the darkness they revered. The Ancient Ones believed that power slept at the center of all things, buried beneath rock and silence and time. Kalitha had read fragments in Calix's private tomes, accounts of Sith alchemists from the Old Republic era who hollowed out entire worlds, searching for resonance points in the Force. Most failed. Some disappeared. One returned blind, mouthless, hands melted to his wrists. He drew images in blood and died smiling. As she moved deeper, her senses widened. The walls wept moisture. Strange fungi pulsed with dim violet light, casting uneven shadows across carvings in the stone. Ritual sigils, Sith curses, glyphs recounting the binding of ancient beasts beneath the crust. She passed an arched doorway with no door, its frame covered in carvings of 12 figures kneeling before a horned spectre who bled fire from his chest. Kalitha paused only to study the air. She could feel her master. Somewhere below, not hiding, but watching. His presence coiled like a serpent around her mind, testing her fear, waiting for a crack. But fear no longer lived in her the way it once had. It had burned out long ago, the way stars burn out before they go nova. The path spiraled downward. The deeper she went, the more ancient the construction became. Durasteel gave way to black obsidian, then to raw stone carved by unknown hands. The catacombs were not lit, but she didn't need light. Her senses reached outward in ripples, reading the echoes in the walls. Every vibration told her a story. A fallen rock, a dead acolyte, blood splattered from a desperate cut. She reached a fork. Left, the path narrowed into a tight throat of stone. Right, it widened into a corridor flanked by 6 headless statues. Each held a chained prisoner, frozen in agony, sculpted in stone, but with uncanny detail. One looked like a Jedi. The other, 5, were indistinct. Lost time, lost names. Kylitha chose the wider path. She did not fear what was visible. It was the things that stayed hidden that deserved attention. She moved silently, one hand on her saber hilt. Her other palm brushed the hilt of her master's weapon, not a lightsaber but a hooked vibroblade she had taken from him once during a training duel. He let her keep it. "Good," he had said. "You take, never ask." Her breath slowed as she reached a gate, an archway of bone and rusted duranium, sealed with an ancient locking glyph. She raised her hand, and the glyph shimmered, reacting to the dark pulse of her aura. It opened not with a sound, but a breath, a sigh of something long buried. Beyond lay the test of memory. The room was circular, ringed by mirrors. At its center, a single stone seat carved from the heart of the mountain. She stepped in and instantly felt the pull. Memories not her own crashing into her thoughts, 1,000 lives, 1,000 voices. She closed her eyes and opened herself to the Force. The room surged. She stood again on Alcanis, a child, filthy, cornered in an alley by off-world slavers. The air reeked of smoke. Her hands were bleeding. A man? Her father? No, not her father. A Jedi reached for her, then fell, throat cut by another. She remembered screaming, but no sound came out. That's when Calix appeared, cloaked in red, his voice like music made of steel and fire. "You have been thrown away. Let me show you how to throw back." The memory fractured. She was older now, 12, maybe 13, watching another acolyte choke on their own tongue after failing the trial of hunger. She hadn't flinched. She had eaten the rest of his rations without a word. The instructors said nothing. That was the real lesson. Another flash Rawnex, where she had dueled a Jedi sentinel in a burned-out temple. He'd begged her to stop, told her she didn't need to do this. She remembered the way his voice cracked, the way she drove the saber into his chest anyway, and the silence that followed. The mirrors around her glowed. One showed her face, but her eyes were golden now, her skin cracked with red veins of corruption. Another mirror showed her lying dead at Calix's feet. Another showed her sitting on his throne, laughing with his voice. She fell to her knees, rage swelled, at the lies, at the manipulation, at the way her memories had been twisted to mold her into something useful. She was not a tool, she was not a vessel. "I am not him," she shouted. The mirrors shattered. Silence returned. She stood, breath shaking. The test had not been a fight, it had been a reflection, the worst kind, the kind that shows you what you might become. She left the chamber without looking back. Lay the lowest level, the sanctum of the master, the vergence, the final duel, the place where Sith became legend or became ash. She descended the final stairway into a blackness thicker than shadow. Her saber hissed to life, blood red and burning. The force grew louder, humming in her veins, in her teeth, behind her eyes. Darth Calix was waiting, and Kylitha was no longer afraid. Chapter 3. Echoes of the Blade. The stairway ended without ceremony. No grand arch, no final gate. Only a cracked stone floor descending into a vast chamber whose dimensions she could not fully see. Her boots clicked softly on dust that hadn't been disturbed in generations. The saber in her hand hissed quietly, its red glow illuminating fragments of the chamber, fragments of armor, shattered training drones, scorched stone. The remains of trials that had taken place long before her, the bones of forgotten students. Trilitha stepped slowly into the center. The force here was different, raw, ancient, and wild. It hummed through the air, vibrating against her skin like sound without a source. This was the vergence, the bleeding wound of Moritrus. Long before Darth Calix took the Citadel, this place had drawn Sith to its depths. Some came to harness it, some came to drown in it. All of them were changed. The force here wasn't merely power, it was memory, living history, and it was watching. She moved past the fractured statues of unknown lords, some headless, some missing limbs, all adorned in rusted remnants of Sith war gear. One wore the breastplate of Darth Kavos, who was said to have carved his name into the core of a neutron star. Another wore the tattered cloak of Darth Morga, the exiled queen who had built her empire from slavers and sorcerers. Their bodies had been lost to time, but their legends lived on in relics like these. Then she saw it, a raised plinth at the far side of the chamber, beneath an open wound in the ceiling where stormlight leaked in from above. Lightning flashed behind her, revealing what lay atop it. A grave, no, a display. A dozen lightsabers laid out in a careful arc. Not trophies, but tombstones. She approached with reverence, though no one taught her to feel such a thing. Her master never instructed her to respect the dead, but Kalitha knew these sabers were more than metal. They were the final echo of each apprentice who had failed in this trial. Each one trained, tested, and broken by the same man she was now hunting. Her hand hovered over one of the hilts. The grip was narrow, designed for a smaller hand. Burnt at the emitter, dried blood still darkened the vents. Varen's blade. She hadn't known him well. He was older, quiet. He never looked her in the eye. But he fought with precision, and he taught her how to disarm a dual saber opponent without being asked. That act had cost him. Calix viewed kindness as weakness. Varen had been called to the trial early. His screams echoed through the citadel for 3 hours. Then silence. Kalitha took a slow breath and picked up the weapon. It vibrated in her hand. Alive with residue, force energy clung to it like smoke. The dead left fingerprints in the force, and Varen's was still fresh. She closed her eyes and let the memory touch her. A corridor, dust, Varen panting, Calix standing before him like a storm-given form, blade unignited, hand raised. A word, yield, then darkness. The vision cut off like a wire snapped under tension. Kalitha opened her eyes. Sweat beaded on her forehead. These weapons, they weren't just relics. They were voices, echoes, lessons in failure. She clipped Varen's saber to her belt beside her own. Not out of honor, out of preparation. She turned. The chamber trembled. A figure stood in the far shadows, too far for her eyes to make clear, but she felt it, felt him. Calix, or a memory of him, or something else. No, herself. The figure stepped forward, and the flickering light revealed its face. Her face, pale, eyes yellowed, veined with darkness, lips curled into a sneer not of anger, but of mockery. The mirror self ignited a red saber. Kalitha stepped back instinctively. Her own saber snapped to life again, casting a jagged red glow over the floor. The duel began without a word. The figure moved fast, faster than her, not bound by physics or flesh, but by fear and fury. Its strikes mirrored her own, the same openings, the same feints, the same cruel precision. She blocked, spun, twisted, pressed back. Each clash sent vibrations through the chamber, setting dust spiraling from the rafters. But this wasn't just a duel. It was a confrontation with everything she had buried. "You think killing him makes you free," the echo hissed. And Kalitha gritted her teeth and struck harder. "You are him. You always were." She broke the echo's guard and cut downward. The blade passed through smoke. Silence. The figure was gone, no body, no mark. She stood alone, panting, her blade dimmed. It wasn't real, but it had nearly killed her. Not with a saber, with the idea that it could. She knelt, palms against the cold stone. The chamber felt different now. It was no longer resisting her. It had accepted her presence. Perhaps because she had faced the question all Sith must eventually ask. Not, "Will I kill my master?" but, "Will I survive myself?" Kalitha stood. From somewhere deeper in the fortress, a voice called to her. Darth Calyx was waiting. Chapter 4. Phantom Lessons. Kalitha passed through the hollow gate into a corridor long lost to purpose. The air grew colder with each step. The walls, once perfectly cut and fitted, now bore deep gouges and cracks, evidence of battles fought by apprentices past, or the shifting of the planet's own will. Here, the vergence throbbed in slow pulses, like a heartbeat in the stone. The deeper she went, the more she felt her mind unspooling at the edges, not breaking, stretching. This was no ordinary place. It had been built atop an old Rakatan conduit, twisted and modified by generations of Sith Lords who treated the Force as both weapon and riddle. Power here did not come free. Every surge of strength brought with it a toll. Memories surfaced unbidden, emotion sharpened to unbearable clarity. The shadows of the citadel were not emptiness, they were living things. The walls themselves whispered, "You are weak. You are late. You are not chosen. You are shaped." Kalitha hissed between clenched teeth and silenced them with will alone. She pressed on. This level had once served as a chamber of instruction, though it resembled no school the galaxy would recognize. Its design was disorienting by intention. Paths spiraled upward and downward at once. Gravity warped in corners. Doors led to rooms that led to nothing. This was where Darth Calyx had instructed her in what he called deep doctrine, the tenets of Sith truth buried beneath the obvious. "Strength is not conquest," he once said, pacing before a hollow map of scorched worlds. "It is survival. Conquest fades, empires crumble, but a Sith remains." He taught that freedom was illusion unless claimed through pain, that love was a chain unless forged into a weapon, that fear, properly honed, became foresight. And above all, the apprentice must one day cast down the master, or live forever in shadow. She passed an alcove where holograms flickered to life at her presence, her own training sessions, stored in the stone. A younger Kalitha, barely 15, facing a half-dismembered training droid in a circular pit, she fought with a jagged, unrefined rage, screaming with every stroke. Her master's voice filled the room like thunder. "Rage is a blade, not a storm. Control it, or I will cut you down myself." The memory faded. In the next chamber, a wide circular arena lay dormant. Its walls were scorched black, the floors scarred with saber burns and craters from force eruptions. This was the Ring of Flame, where final sparring matches were held. No instructors, no intervention. Kalitha had broken 2 ribs here fighting a Zeltron initiate who believed her too soft to survive. He no longer walked. It was here that Darth Calyx had once cornered her, demanded she recite the names of every Sith Lord to fall by betrayal. She had listed 27. He had corrected her. There are hundreds, and all of them failed to see the shadow behind their throne. The lesson was always the same: trust nothing, expect betrayal, prepare to be betrayed, and survive it anyway. She moved onward, descending into the crucible, a library of agony, not a place of books, but of memory stones. Obsidian slabs encoded with psychic imprints. Here, every scream, every death, every lesson carved into flesh had been preserved by Force-sensavory ritualists in ages past. She approached a pedestal and touched a stone engraved with a serpent swallowing itself. The reaction was immediate. Her mind was no longer her own. She stood in a temple of ice. A Jedi, young, pure, pleading with her not to fight. She ignited her saber anyway. She stood in a starship corridor, surrounded by clones who had turned on her. Their armor was scorched. Her master's voice ordered her to abandon them. She did. She stood before a mirror. Her face cracked. Her eyes were calyxes. Her voice screamed without sound. The visions broke like glass. She fell to one knee, gasping, her saber trembling in her hand. These weren't her memories. Some were fragments of Jedi who had once come here, prisoners or victims. Some were ghosts of apprentices past, buried with too much power and too little will. The stones fed on force sensitivity, and in return they gave truth. But not clarity. Truth in the Sith tradition was jagged, it was cruel, it did not teach, it revealed, and the student either broke or sharpened. Kalitha stood slowly, wiping blood from her nose. Her heart thundered, her skin tingled. She whispered the mantra Calix had forced her to memorize at age 10. I am not the light, I am the flame that consumes it. I do not serve balance, I am the blade that cuts through it. I am power clothed in will. I am Sith. The crucible pulsed with approval. She passed through the final gate, a narrow corridor so tight she had to turn sideways. The walls scraped her armor, her breath fogged before her. The cold was not temperature, it was memory, older than language. And then she emerged into the final sanctum. A massive chamber, ringed by towering pillars of obsidian and crystal. A vortex of force energy churned in the ceiling, dark clouds crackling with violet lightning. At its center stood a platform, floating above a pit of darkness too deep to measure. Darth Calix stood upon it, cloaked in red and black, his face shadowed by a jagged hood, his hands bare, no weapon in sight. His presence was still a thunderstorm wrapped in silence. It pressed down on her like gravity. You have come, he said. Kalitha nodded once. I wondered if you would make it this far. I always would. A pause. Then begin. His hand raised, and the final trial began. Chapter 5. A hollow victory. Kalitha moved first, her lightsaber igniting in a hiss of bloodlight, carving a red arc through the air as she launched toward the floating platform. Calix didn't move, not even to summon his blade. The wind that howled through the open chamber twisted around him, unnatural, as if afraid to touch him. Her leap was precise, focused. She brought her saber down in a vertical cleave meant to bisect him from collar to hip. It passed through smoke. He was gone. No, behind her. The force warned her too late. Pain exploded across her back as an unseen wave of energy hurled her into one of the obsidian pillars. The impact cracked her armor and nearly shattered her lungs. She rolled to her feet, coughing blood just in time to see Calix step calmly back onto the platform. His hands were still empty. Strike harder, he said, or don't strike at all. She charged again, this time weaving feints into her attack. Low sweep, overhead feint, stab to the throat. Calix blocked each with open hands, catching the blade in force constructs that shimmered like violet glass. He moved like wind around her strikes, his feet never fully touching the floor. I trained you better than this, he murmured. Kalitha screamed and unleashed a pulse of raw energy, a concussive shock wave that shattered the stone beneath her boots and hurled shards of the floor into the air. The blast hit him directly and passed through. The image flickered. An illusion, a projection, a memory. She spun in time to meet the real strike. Calix appeared from above, his body descending like a hawk, cloak flared, red lightsaber igniting with a growl that split the air. She barely raised her blade in time. Their sabers locked, the red glow merging into a molten seam between them. "You want this?" he whispered. "You think it means freedom?" She snarled, pushed and spun away, breathing hard. He pressed the attack now. For all his age, he moved like a serpent, efficient, lethal, coiled in every motion. He fought one-handed, not out of arrogance, but to show her that even now she wasn't his equal. Not yet. But she'd expected that. Kalitha dropped low and hurled one of the sabers from her belt, Varen's, into a side arc. It ignited mid-air and flew toward Calix's exposed flank. He blocked it. Covered, only just. In that moment of distraction, she surged in with a saber stab directly for his ribs. Her blade struck, piercing flesh. His eyes widened just slightly. She wrenched the blade upward and backward, cutting through sinew, armor, and spine. "You shall..." Not immediately. He staggered first, dropped to one knee. Blood, dark, almost black, splashed onto the stone. His saber deactivated, his head tilted, almost curious. "Well done," he rasped. She stood over him, trembling. Her hands ached, her knees were shaking, her body felt like broken glass held together by spite. "You were always my favorite," he said, voice thin as silk. "Not because you were the strongest, because you hated me the most." She raised her saber. "Go on," he said. "Finish it." Dead. The blade hissed once more. And Darth Calix died. The chamber fell silent. The force trembled, and then went still, like a great beast exhaling its final breath. Kalitha stood frozen. She had done it. The trial was over, the path complete. Her master was dead. She was no longer apprentice. And yet, something was missing. No chorus of power rose to greet her, no rush of strength, no revelation, only silence. Only blood. She stood there for minutes, or hours, it was hard to tell. The chamber didn't seem to breathe anymore. She turned and looked back across the path she'd taken. The relics, the crucible, the echoes, all the pain, all the tests, and this was the end. Her hands began to tremble, not from weakness, from confusion. She looked down at Calix's face, still, peaceful, and she saw herself reflected in his empty eyes. That was the first moment it occurred to her. I don't know what to do now. The Sith taught that power was the goal, domination, will, that killing the master freed the apprentice. But no one had said what came after. Was she to rule? Who would she command? The Citadel was empty. The galaxy didn't know her name. The Sith didn't send heralds. They sent nightmares. She looked at her saber, then at the other, Varen's, still lying at the edge of the platform. Her thoughts spiraled. Do I rebuild? Take an apprentice? Do I leave? Hide? Do I even know who I am without someone to fight? In that moment, a whisper rippled through the force. Not a word, a feeling, familiar, intimate. Not Calix, herself. And she understood. The final trial had never been about killing him. It had been about what remained afterward. Would she become him, or something worse? The answer would come not in this chamber, but in the long shadow he had cast, and that she now wore. Chapter 6. The Chamber of Truth. She left the body where it fell. The platform hovered, suspended in air above the darkness beneath the Citadel's foundation. No bridge led back. The stone pathway that had brought her here had crumbled sometime during the fight, dissolved like much of her certainty. For a time, she simply sat. Calix's corpse at her back, the storm overhead reduced to a low rumble. Her saber dimmed in her hand, humming like a memory she couldn't shake. Eventually, she rose and stepped into the abyss. There was no sound, no wind, just the pulse of the force surrounding her, slowing her fall as her body drifted downward through the vergence core. Below the platform, a column of energy spiraled endlessly. Dark purple, touched with red, woven through with ancient binding glyphs etched into the stone around it. She didn't know who built them, Sith? Rakata? Something older? It didn't matter. The Force lived here in a way it lived nowhere else, and shaped, primordial, and it knew her now. She landed softly in a circular antechamber beneath the sanctum, an inner shrine only the victor of the trial would ever see. It was said to predate even the Sith lords who had once ruled Moritras. Its walls were polished obsidian, reflective like water. In the center, a single black obelisk, floating above a narrow pit of fire. It radiated heat, but not physical, not temperature. The heat of revelation, of fear laid bare. She stepped toward it. It turned slowly of its own accord, displaying inscriptions in multiple tongues. Sith, Rakatan, and a language she didn't recognize at all. Her eyes traced the runes, but it wasn't her mind that understood them. Her memory did. Vision spilled forth. She saw herself as a child again, trapped in a cell, watching the slavers argue over her price. She saw Calix watching her from the shadows, not pitying, not mocking, studying, choosing. She saw the trials she had endured, fire, hunger, betrayal. She saw each as he had seen it, not as hardship, but design, each scar shaped to narrow her path, to hollow her into a vessel. He hadn't trained her to surpass him. He had trained her to become him. And she had. The realization struck not like a blade, but like a mirror. She turned away from the obelisk, breathing hard. The chamber spun. Was this it? She had won. She had passed every trial, killed her master, endured the deepest chamber of the Sith's most sacred fortress. But now she was alone, her triumph wrapped in silence. It was said that upon slaying their master, a Sith must choose, seize the path of rule, or vanish into legend. But what legend was left to claim? The Empire was dust, the Sith scattered, no order remained, no fleet awaited her command, no world trembled at her name. And the worst part? She felt nothing. No elevation, no transcendence, only a bitter, hollow awareness that her path had always led to this point, not by destiny, but by design. She had been shaped by someone else's hand. She sat by the edge of the fire pit beneath the obelisk and stared into the flame. It pulsed to the rhythm of her breath. The walls shimmered. A voice broke the silence. Not Calix's, hers. What now? The chamber didn't answer, but the Force stirred, not with clarity, not with guidance, but with a single truth. Power is choice. She blinked, then slowly stood. Her legs were stiff, her ribs bruised from the earlier fight, but she no longer shook. Miss Chamber, like the trials, had shown her the truth. Her master had sought to mold her into a vessel for his legacy, but in killing him, she had earned the chance to be more than that, not just a link in the chain, but the hand that forged the next. She turned back toward the obelisk and extended her hand. It floated into her grasp, and as her fingers brushed the smooth stone, it cracked. From within, a sliver of metal emerged, curved, polished, wrapped in black leather. A hilt. A new saber. The crystal inside hummed with her breath. Not red, not yet. It would bleed when she was ready. When she poured her pain into it, she took it, clipped it beside her first saber, and walked from the chamber, up through the citadel, through the crucible and the arena, past the shattered mirrors and the hall of silence. The storm above had thinned. Light, pale and cold, poured through the broken ceiling. She paused once at the throne room. It was empty. Her master's throne. She didn't sit. Instead, she passed it and walked to the outer balcony where the wind howled across the cliffs. The world of Moritris sprawled below her like a graveyard. No cities, no people. Only broken stone, crimson moss, and the bones of old wars. And for the first time she spoke her new name aloud. Not the one her master gave her, the one she chose. It rang out across the canyon, and the darkness remembered it. Chapter 7. The Duel of Ruin. The wind battered the citadel's peak as Kalitha descended the outer stairs toward the southern landing platform. The storm had not left, only shifted. Clouds churned overhead, torn by silent thunder. The air crackled. Her cloak snapped behind her like a wound refusing to close. The platform itself was a half-circle of durasteel, rusted and fractured from time and battle, suspended over the edge of a bottomless gorge, and there in the middle of it stood her master. Calix, alive. Kalitha froze. Her hand twitched toward her saber, but her heart didn't race. Her breath didn't quicken. Because it wasn't him. The figure looked like him. His build, his stance, his cloak torn the same way it had been when she killed him. But there was no presence, no heat in the force, no pressure against her mind. An echo, or worse, a trial still lingering, one final illusion cast by the vergence to see if she truly understood. She stepped forward, boots ringing on the metal. "I killed you," she said. The figure didn't speak. Instead, it raised its saber. Her saber, the original hilt, the one she forged with Calix, bled with him, buried others with. It ignited in silence, red. Kalitha activated her new blade. The crystal inside had cracked unevenly when it bled. The sound it made was deeper, slower, as if resisting being shaped. She welcomed the resistance. Their sabers met in a clash that sent sparks into the storm. Kalitha's breath remained steady, her form fluid, but she could feel the difference. This was not just a memory. The figure fought with instinct, precision, the way she did. Because it was her, not Calix, not a phantom. It was the shadow she had carried since her first kill, the part of her shaped by rage, honed by fear, sharpened by the expectations of a master she had never truly escaped. Moved like her, fought like her, struck with the fury she had once used to survive. But it had no soul. The duel tore across the landing pad. Blades scorched metal, sparks rained in all directions. The storm howled, lightning splitting the sky overhead. Kalitha pressed forward, controlling the rhythm, not overpowering, not retreating, but testing. Each strike a question. The shadow didn't answer. It didn't need to. It was her doubt, her fury, her hate, and she understood. This was the duel of ruin. Every Sith must face it, some as visions, some as madness, some as prophecy. The moment when the self is forced to confront the shape the darkness carved them into. The master she killed was flesh. This one was reflection. She began to slow her strides, not in fatigue, but in awareness. Studying the rhythm, letting her blade meet the phantoms with less force, watching, listening. And then, for the first time, she stepped back. The figure paused. A beat passed. Then another. It raised its saber again. Kalitha deactivated hers. The phantom lunged and passed through her. Gone. She turned slowly to look behind her. Nothing. No figure, no echo. Just wind and lightning and the jagged stone towers of the citadel watching in silence. The duel had never been about victory. Not this time. It had been about recognition. She sat at the edge of the landing pad, letting her legs dangle into the storm. Her saber sat beside her on the metal, its cracked crystal humming low, as if uncertain whether to sleep or scream. She let her breath slow. The force around her quieted. Not in surrender, in acknowledgement. The vergence accepted her now, not because she was Sith, not because she had killed, but because she had endured what the darkness demanded and chosen not to be consumed. Not entirely. The duel of ruin was the last test, and she was still standing. Chapter 8. A Master's Death. Rain finally came, not in sheets, but in a slow acid mist that hissed softly where it touched metal and stone. Kalitha remained seated on the edge of the landing platform, her cloak soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She stared out into the chasm as darkness draped itself over the jagged peaks of Moritrus like a mourning cloth. Beneath her, the planet's core pulsed with dormant energy, not dead, never dead, but waiting, watching. A presence that had long endured the ambitions and failures of those who thought themselves masters. She stood, saber in hand, and made her way back through the citadel, moving slowly now, no longer with the urgency of survival, but the clarity of aftermath. Every corridor she passed had changed, though no stone had shifted. The shadows no longer tested her, the walls no longer whispered. The trial was over, and with it, the will of the place had fallen quiet. She reached the throne room again. Calix's body still lay there. Not the phantom, not the vision, the real corpse. Where she had left it, twisted upon the cold obsidian, his saber deactivated beside his open hand. His face had not changed. He had died with his eyes open, not in pain, in understanding. She knelt beside him. She had thought killing him would bring her peace, that vengeance, or at least closure, would bloom from the final act. But instead, she saw herself reflected in those lifeless yellow eyes, and the feeling she found wasn't triumph, it was recognition. Calix had known what she would do. He had raised her for this moment, not just to kill him, but to become the vessel for his legacy, and in dying by her hand, he had sealed the cycle, unless she broke it. Kalitha reached down and closed his eyes with her fingertips. She took his saber, not to use, but to keep. A symbol, a burden, a reminder. Then she ignited her own and turned it downward, stabbing the crimson blade into the floor beside his head. The stone cracked, glowed briefly, then cooled. A mark. A grave. A warning. She did not mourn, but she did remember. As she rose, the air in the throne room thickened. She expected silence, but something moved. Not sound, not form, but presence. The voice came not from the walls, nor her mind, but the force. "You are now what I was." Her body tensed, but she did not speak. "You carry my flame. You wear my shadow." It was his voice, and not aleness. An echo preserved in the vergence, woven into the rituals of the throne. A death mask, a memory fossilized in the dark. "But the shadow is not the self," she said quietly. "Not anymore." The presence trembled, like wind passing through empty halls. Then silence. She turned away from the body and ascended the throne. Not to sit, to see. From here the citadel stretched out below her. Black towers, jagged steps, corridors where hundreds had fought, bled, and screamed. This place had witnessed the birth and death of countless apprentices. It had never wept. Kalitha looked out across Moritrus. The horizon glowed faintly where the storm began to lift, and still she felt nothing. Not because she was numb, because something inside her had ended. Her master, her purpose, her rage. But in that space something else now lived, clarity. She turned from the throne, not pausing to savor the view, and made her way to the old hangar on the eastern spire. A single shuttle remained, Calix's private vassal. She activated its systems. The engines groaned like waking beasts. She paused in the doorway before boarding, looking back one last time. The citadel loomed behind her, cold and towering. Once she had dreamed of ruling it. Now she left it behind. She rose through the upper atmosphere, and Moritras fell away beneath her, swallowed again by storm and shadow. She didn't chart a course, didn't choose a destination, only a direction. Forward. Chapter 9. The Throne of Ash. Time lost meaning in the black between stars. Kalitha's ship. A spiked skeletal dagger once flown by Calix himself, cut through hyperspace on a silent trajectory with no beacon, no signal, and no name. She kept the navigation systems locked on random drift, her only input a single word in the flight log: away. In the solitude of the cockpit, she sat motionless, not meditating, not resting, watching, waiting, processing. The ship's interior bore the trappings of a Sith Lord, chambers steeped in dried incense, a meditation sarcophagus carved from obsidian, and racks of weapons looted from a dozen dead rivals. There were relics, trophies, and arcane instruments humming with dormant power. None of it mattered now. To her, it was a mausoleum, a prison with polished edges. She wandered its halls each cycle like a phantom, touching nothing, speaking to no one. Occasionally she stared at her reflection in the burnished walls. She no longer recognized herself, not because her features had changed, but because her purpose had. The holocron remained dark. No Sith summoned her, no enemy pursued. She had passed beyond the map, into the vacuum where masters died and monsters were born. And there, alone in that silence, she began to hear the voice, not Calix, herself, but not the voice that fought, not the voice that killed, a quieter one, the part she had buried to survive, the child that wept in the dark, the girl that asked questions, the apprentice who, once, had hesitated before plunging her saber into a fallen Jedi. It spoke only in memories. She returned to the throne chamber each night, Calix's private sanctum aboard the vessel. The seat was hewn from volcanic stone, the back inscribed with Sith axioms: victory through pain, power through knowledge, freedom through death. She sat in it for the first time, cold, immense, silent, and there she began to unravel, not violently, not with madness, with clarity. She remembered every lesson, every lie disguised as truth, every truth shaped to wound. She began to see patterns, threads. The logic of the Sith was perfect, but only within its own graveyard. They taught freedom, but only by destroying the self. They taught strength, but only through obedience to pain. They condemned attachment, yet bred disciples addicted to approval. Calix had never freed her. He had hollowed her, and she had let him because there had been no other way, until now. The throne no longer felt like a prize. It was a fossil, a reminder, a thing made by a dead man to contain the living. She stood, and for the first time in days spoke aloud. "I am not your shadow." The force rippled, soft, like fabric torn from the edge of a blade. "I am not your heir." Another tremor. The holocrons on the shelves sparked. The meditation sarcophagus cracked down the middle as if rejecting its occupant. "I am not what you made me." Silence. And then, freedom. Not a surge, not an explosion, but a slow, widening breath in the force, as if the galaxy exhaled, as if the path forward opened, not clear, but possible. Kalitha returned to the cockpit and set a new course, a real one, not to Coruscant, not to Korriban, not to any world that bore the marks of the old orders. She searched the archives, found nothing, then closed the screen and whispered a set of coordinates she hadn't spoken in years. Arcanus, her birthplace. She would return not to reclaim it, not to rule, but to remember. Because only in remembering who she had been could she begin to choose what she would become. Chapter 10. The Apprentice's Shadow. Ikanis had changed. The sky was the same, dull amber haze veiled by industrial smog. But the city beneath it had grown in every direction. The slums where she had once lived, if it could be called living, were now swallowed by newer structures, repurposed factories and residential towers hastily stacked like forgotten cargo. Lights blinked from every level, casting shifting shadows through the alleys where small eyes still watched from behind rusted gates. Kalitha stood on a rooftop overlooking District 9C. Below, the narrow streets hissed with speeders and voices, alive with desperation. Her hood concealed her face, and no one gave her a second glance. She was just another ghost in a city that manufactured them. She didn't return to her old home. It wasn't there anymore. She didn't try to find the slavers. They were either dead or rich. It didn't matter. What she did seek was silence. She found it in a half-collapsed temple ruin on the city's outskirts, a forgotten Jedi outpost buried beneath a housing complex that had been abandoned during the Clone Wars. The Republic had left its bones behind. The Empire hadn't even bothered to scavenge. Inside, she sat among the cracked pillars and stared at the faded symbol of the Jedi Order carved into the stone. She didn't weep, but she felt. The Jedi had once tried to save her. She had been too far gone by then, too angry, too frightened. Calix had found her first. She whispered her name, Kalitha, and it sounded new in this place. For hours she remained there, not meditating, not suppressing, but allowing, letting herself feel what she had always denied, the fear, the sorrow, the fury, the guilt, letting them surface, letting them breathe. She did not fall apart. She simply became. That night, under the moonless sky, she walked to the edge of the district and stood by the graveyard of machines. Droves of rusted droids and stripped transports, forgotten relics of a dozen wars. She ignited her new saber. The cracked crystal inside pulsed with violet light now, not red. It had shifted. So had she. She buried Calix's saber in the dirt, not with a ritual, not with anger, but with purpose. Let the galaxy forget him. Let her remember. She left Alcanis the next morning without saying a word to anyone. And the galaxy kept spinning. Tales of a rogue Sith began to ripple through the outer rim, a shadow without a master, a blade without a banner. Some claimed she hunted slavers, others said she sought lost Jedi holocrons. A few whispered that she walked the line between Sith and something older, something freer. She never took a name, never claimed a title, but the Force knew her, and the dark still whispered her name through the cracks in broken worlds, not as an apprentice, not as a master, but as a shadow that chose to walk away from both, and in doing so became something more.